again to another Campfire Project discussion. And today I have with me, first of all, Angela Heise, who is an emotional productivity trainer and coach. How are you, Angela?
Hi, Alan. Good morning. I'm really well, thank you.
It's great to have you back on the show again. I've then got next Karen Chaston, Beyond Loss life coach and co-founder of Live Love by Design. How are you, Karen?
Always great, thank you, Alan, and good to be here again.
Excellent. And Nicole Davidson, founder and of Growth to Success. How are you, Nicole? Oops, we've lost your voice there. We can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the answer was I'm fantastic, thank you.
Don't you love it? Okay. Today, the subject is about the 5 to 10 things that you would tell your younger self. Now, this one's going to be quite an interesting one, but I know that there's always a purpose behind this. And Karen, you're the one who suggested this subject. So first of all, before we jump into some of those points, what was the main reason for bringing this one forward?
The main reason was obviously we don't know what we don't know. And it would always be great. We're all very smart in hindsight now, aren't we all? And I just thought, you know what, I'd love to be able to go back to my younger self and just give some advice to her. And would she have listened? I'd like to think she would have. But more importantly, it's about helping others to go, do you know what? The sooner I get this, the easier my life could be. And that's mainly what it's about.
Excellent. And so what would be one of the things that you would tell your younger self?
My first one would be, and I didn't get this till I was like 54, so this is a really important one. And it is, you are the only person you are going to spend your entire life with, 24/7. So learn to love yourself, but more importantly, don't give up on your dreams and desires for someone else or for everyone else around you. Make sure that you're true to who you want to be.
Excellent. And how about you, Angela? What was, say, one of the things that you would look at or tell yourself?
My top of the list was exactly the same one as Karen.
Perfect.
Yes, it was love yourself, and not for who you should be, but who you are, warts and all, and turn the so-called weaknesses into strengths. It's not about saying, okay, I'm a raging maniac, but it's about saying, I know how to express my negative emotions. How can I express them even more effectively? But it's acknowledging that, for example.
Yes.
The other one that I had was, and that fits in with that, is be proudly and humbly imperfect. We're all striving for perfection and, you know, the whole I'm not good enough. It's about just acknowledging that we're not going to be good at everything, but that we can stretch and take risks and move into something and really have fun with it, instead of getting into that stress of I'm going to be perfect at this, and if I can't do this, I'm not going to do it. And then be humble about it, not going, okay, I've really mastered this, now I can really sit there and go, look at me. But just going, you know what, I'm still imperfect, I'm still stretching.
Oh, that's it. You're always going to be learning, no matter how good you get. There's
Exactly.
always going to be further growth that can come from it. And Nicole, what would you say would be your top on the list?
My first one was who you are is perfect.
Yeah.
So we have this tendency to look outside of ourselves and compare ourselves and measure ourselves. Or at the end of the day, like, we're just part of this magnificent ecosystem called life. And, you know, what we bring to the table is what we bring to the table, and it's needed. And so rather than, you know, judging that and comparing ourselves, just getting really comfortable with being who you are and just, you know, loving yourself for that and having fun. You know, we can create so much drama for ourselves. If we just took a moment just to chill and realize that, you know, we're actually creating our own experience. And so we can either buy into the drama, or we can create, you know, whatever emotions we want to create, and do it intentionally. I think live intentionally rather than just being reactionary.
The thing I love about that, similarities between the three of you, and it's not so much different to mine as well, because growing up I was always told I would never achieve. So I was always living up to other people's standards. And so the first thing to myself would have been live by my standards and nobody else's. And from that, grow from that, because my focus would then be on what I was doing, not so much what other people were telling me that I should be doing.
Yeah. There's a lot of nodding going to be in this show.
Yes, I think so.
Yes, I don't know that one. Yeah.
So what else would you be thinking of there, Karen? What would be the next things?
Okay, well, this isn't my next one, but I'm going to throw it in because I think it's a funny one. And you all know how I love to think I'm funny. So when I was around, I think I was in first form, which is what, year 8 or 9 now. And I had a girlfriend who for 6 months practiced how to whistle with her fingers. And we would catch the bus together, like to and from school, and she practiced non-stop for 6 months. And one of my things would have been practice with her. The amount of times I have wished that I could wolf whistle, whether you're at a concert or you're anywhere, and I've always regretted not taking the actions to actually learn how to do it. So that's my advice, is take your action steps and learn something. You may not think you need it now, but you will later in life. Everything shows up for a reason.
Yeah.
And that one brings back a memory for me as well, because my first wife, one of her sisters, used to whistle really well, but her husband couldn't. So he would put his fingers to his mouth, make the movements, and she'd do the whistle and call over the taxis.
See, she might have been my girlfriend from school.
But that sort of adds to what you said about not taking yourself seriously as well, as enjoying those particular things.
Yes. But it drove me crazy. It seriously drove me crazy. And I should have just done it with her. It would have been good.
What sort of things then, Nicole and Angela, that you would like to have done that was something like that, along those sort of lines, that was less serious and more frivolous?
Ooh. I know that I didn't dance until I was in my 20s, because in my teenage years, everybody in my class went to a ballroom dancing course. And at the end of the course, my father danced with me, and I'd followed all my steps. I did everything the way I should have, and I stood more on his feet than on the floor. And so he sat me down on my seat and said, "You really need another course. This is terrible." And I was so ashamed, and I did another course, and I never went to the final ball, because I was also so shy that I always ended up with the boys who didn't know anything. And so I was the one who learned how to lead, which was not a really good thing at that point. But I decided I wasn't going to dance at all. It was only in my 20s when dancing was the only sport I could actually do, because I was living in Taiwan. And there were no gyms, and the pollution was so bad that you couldn't go jogging or anything like that. So I went to the disco on the weekend, and I danced for hours and hours. And that's when I dropped it. It was only years later that I had a conversation with my father, who admitted that he'd never gone to dance school. And that when I stood on his feet, it was only because he didn't know how to dance.
Oh.
So
Also a really good lesson, Angela, isn't it? You know, the
Yeah.
fact that we take on board.
And I love dancing. I absolutely adore it.
Yeah, but the fact that we kind of take on people's comments, whereas really it's their stuff, not our stuff, and yet it can have such a lasting impact.
Yes. So again, do what's fun, as Karen was saying, and don't care about other people. If they tell you can't do it anyways. It's not about being a ballerina. I was taken out of ballet school because the teacher told my mother I was never going to be a ballerina. I never wanted to be a ballerina. I just wanted to dance.
Yeah. You see me dancing and that, you'd know that I didn't take any lessons.
But it's not about being fantastic at it. It's, as you said, it's the fun.
And that's, I know at school we did a bit of dancing, and I liked it, but I didn't feel comfortable with it. And it was always, as I said, the criticisms. And that's the thing, as you said, Angela, other people's words that hold us back from doing the things that we would have done otherwise. And that's a bit of a shame. So, just jumping in here, one of my next ones was to make sure that the people I listened to were more the voices in my head, not the other person's voice outside, that was then causing my head to think in a particular way. So it was to keep my own counsel, be my own guide. But that first, and then look at everybody that was I had as coaches, or people who were trying to coach me, ask the question, were they able to do that? Were they actually walking their own talk or just talking it?
Yeah.
I had one similar to that, Alan, is that, we always have the answers within.
Mm.
It goes back to what I was saying before about, we're always looking outside, and yet nobody has any idea. We're all making it up. And so the fact that, if we sit still and we listen, and sometimes the answer might be, I don't know, and that's fine. But then you then can make a decision about where you go from there. So, listening to that little voice inside and knowing that that's where your power sits, rather than giving that away to people who actually have no idea what you're here for on this planet.
Mm.
Yeah, and it is, and we don't trust our inner voice. So many times we just feel that everyone else has the answers, but we don't. We all have our own answers within ourselves, but it's getting to them and trusting them is, I think, what life's journey is all about.
I think it's true when they say that there's really no real realities. It's everything's an illusion, and we choose our own illusion and make it a reality. So it's a case of choosing the best illusion that fits us and live it.
Yeah.
And we're all different. We're not going to be the same. And taking everyone's advice and then trying to live to that, as I say, you can't please everybody. You just drive yourself insane.
Yeah, I read a book yesterday. I've started reading a new book, and if I may, I'd like to read this little passage, which I sent to a whole lot of people, because I feel this is what our inner selves needs to know. And it was, I once heard a story that each of us comes into this life as a pristine, pure, flawless diamond. And through the trials of growing up and the course of life's pains, our innate brilliance becomes hidden by a load of rubbish, lies, judgments, and limitations we buy into. Then when we become adults, we cover over the whole mess with a coat of bright, shiny nail polish. We present this artificial veneer to the world and wonder why no one seems to think it's that extraordinary.
That's good. That's real good.
Yeah, and I just thought, I think that's what this is about, is us not buying into the stuff that we feel is real because people have told us that. Like when I was 5 years old, I was told to mime at a school play because I couldn't sing. I was throwing everyone off key. So I don't sing very often. But as I've got older, I do sing, and I think, yeah, sure, I may sing off key, but it's only because I believed what everyone else told me. And my mum said I didn't mime, I did sing, and everyone was off key.
Yeah, well, the only place I was allowed to sing was in the shower, and I came out of the shower one day and found all my boys and my partner all standing at their respective doors staring at me going, I was even banned from singing in the shower.
That's a tough crowd, Ellen.
So I won't break into tune here.
Okay.
That's the thing, though. This is what happens all the time. It's listening to other people and taking all that stuff on. It's one of the reasons why we've got so much separation between men and women at the moment, because we're always told, the males in particular, you're seen, you're not heard. You keep it all down. You've got to be strong. Well, the trouble was that sort of strength actually created a weakness. Yeah. And now men are struggling to actually show their emotions.
Yeah. And women are saying, why won't you talk to me? Why don't you share what you're feeling?
Yeah. I've got actually on my list is speak up, find your voice and express your emotions, because we're just learning to keep things down, but we're also learning to not be vulnerable. It's all about approval seeking. So we let injustices stand. We don't speak up. If we do, we go into, we go into a rage pretty quickly. Or again, we don't express our emotions at all. It's all about being rational. But if we learn to speak out, to be vulnerable and just make our voice heard, and it's really know when to do that. That's the other thing. It's not just speaking up, but also knowing when to. So it's not about rescuing another person. I speak up on behalf of somebody else, and they don't really need me to speak up for them. And also, or speaking up for people who really can't, or animals, or whatever it might be. And when we really need to shut up altogether and let things run their course. You know, and again, all of these, the speaking up and the feeling of the emotion and trusting the intuition that goes with that, we don't learn that, not particularly well.
Mm.
And how about you, Nicole?
Regards to what you were saying there, Angela, I think, you know, when I was younger, I had a pretty narrow emotional range, and I didn't really know how to express myself fully. And so when I went to express myself, sometimes it had come out in a way that people couldn't hear. So I kind of learned that expressing yourself is not good.
Yeah.
And, you know, through things that I've done as I've got older, I've totally sort of come to understand a lot about me and how I operate and the reasons for that. I was very much in my head, and my head would wallop my emotional self. So there wasn't really a place for that. So I think that, you know, getting to understand yourself and being compassionate with yourself is the first step, because we can be so judgmental. And when we can come to that place where we can offer ourselves compassion, that's when we can start communicating with other people in a way that they can understand, because we can then put ourselves in their shoes as well.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really big one for me. So, you know, having a, you know, exploring an emotional range and having an awareness of the impact that has on you and the impact it has on others.
Yeah. Because it's all about, I like you, I didn't express my emotions. I expressed myself very clearly when I was a child. And then I was told not to. And so my rage just went down and down and down until I came to what I call is FINE. And FINE is an acronym: fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable. So I actually became very, you know, in private, I was very emotional, but in public, I had a very narrow way of expressing myself. And one of the women I knew actually said to me she could never trust me because I was always fine. You could never see that I had any emotions, no matter what was going on. And she knew stuff was going on. I was always fine.
That's true when you think about it. People who don't have that range, you do think, what are you hiding? Yes.
And that's it. You know, I know in profiling, there's a particular trait that we can see in someone's face, and we know they're going through stress. We know it's, you know, if you look at someone's eyes and the pupils get really small, that's when they're in a lot of deep stress. And we had the saying that anybody who had beady eyes, small irises, that they couldn't be trusted. But really, it's an example of what you just talked about there, Angela, where people have kept it all down. It's the fact that they don't trust the rest of the world. So we don't trust them because they're not talking. And that's something we've created by the way in which we've responded to our environment and the people around us and what we've taken on.
So it is about vulnerability again. It's about expressing ourselves in such a way that we build those connections.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to the fact that you have to be vulnerable to be healthy.
I did hear an expression the other day on a podcast I was listening to, which kind of resonated with me. It talks about verbal vomiting.
Yeah.
And, you know, on social media these days, we see so many people, you know, being really raw. This is going to be vulnerable, whatever. And, you know, she was talking about the difference between verbal vomiting and being in a place where you can just express something. And I think having that awareness about where you're at, making sure you've processed something so that you can express it in a sort of safe environment rather than just going rah and then expecting people to be able to sit there and be there for you. Yeah. I liked that expression. I thought that's so true.
Yeah, that vomiting, as you said, it's uncontrolled. And it's what happens when you haven't done the other previous, that you haven't actually opened up and spoken when you had your faculties about you.
Yeah. And we often vent to people who really shouldn't know about it. I mean, it's like we go to the people where we go, I really want you to buy into my drama, rather than go to somebody who can listen with empathy and just say, yeah, that sounds really tough, instead of going, oh, really? Oh, what a bastard, you know, or, oh, you poor thing, you know, all of this stuff that really doesn't help us, because all it does, it amplifies whatever is going on for us, and then it becomes us.
Yeah, and that was one of my ones, was to actually listen more and to really listen, as opposed to listening to answer but just sometimes people don't even seek an answer. They just want to be heard.
Absolutely.
And that's it. The thing is, it's all about the second level of empathy. You've got your cognitive empathy, which is all about understanding that somebody's in pain or whatever, their emotional state. But then they've got the emotional empathy, which is when we actually feel their pain. And then you've got the what do you call it? The compassionate empathy after that, whereas I can see you're in pain, I can feel your pain, but now let's fix the problem. So that empathy where somebody really gets to help you. But that middle one where it's about the emotional is where most of us get stuck in that, especially in Facebook. When I can feel your pain, but I don't want to feel it. So I therefore take it on and then join the fight and everything else, because it's me being able to change the way I'm feeling about what I'm feeling. So we create a problem by staying in that emotional empathy. We need to move on to compassionate. And as you say,
a lot of people don't even know about the differences. I mean, you talked about, and I think cognitive empathy is really, really important because it helps us not buy into this. It's a different brain function. Instead, it comes from the middle prefrontal cortex rather than from the limbic system, where we go into fight flight. Which is where we go into the drama with somebody. And that's where the emotions go completely ballistic. And then compassionate empathy is about rescuing somebody, taking on their pain. And that's when we talked about this earlier, when we have, when we have carers, they go into compassion burnout because they don't know how to differentiate between those things. So I think we need to educate people in empathy.
So I've always looked at the empathy the other way around, the cognitive being able to understand that somebody's in pain, which even a psychopath needs to know that, or a torturer, because they wouldn't know whether they're able to be effective unless they can feel the other person's pain. I see it. Then you had the emotional where you felt it, but the compassion is where you went, okay, I can see your pain, I can feel your pain, but now let's go away and fix it.
Yeah, but again, I totally agree with you, but it's the ability to differentiate between the three of them. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. And they either, so if you stay in cognitive empathy and you can't feel something, yes, psychopath. But if you constantly get dragged into the drama, or you drag yourself into the drama because you resonate with a person on the same frequency, they say that a doctor would never be really effective if they were just in that emotional empathy, because they would really resonate. And that's why one of the reasons why GPs have such a low life expectancy, because they don't learn how to do that, or they turn that off altogether, which still has the same effect, because when you're fine, you're still feeling it, you just don't recognize it.
That's it. So you need to go into the emotional to actually be able to connect with them, to show empathy too. Be able to show them that you're connected, you understand it, but you need to move through it as quickly as you can. Because it's like if you'd fallen off the swings at the playground, you take your child into the hospital and they've got a bone sticking out their arm or whatever, and the nurse comes up and goes, well, I can feel that. That's terrible. Oh, they should do something about the swings, and they should do this, they should do that. No, just take me in and get the thing fixed up. So it's always a case of connect with them, but then move on to how can I help you fix that? I'll give you an example. I had a guy sitting in the car with me one day, and we were both involved in a program where it was about a health forum, and he was having a problem with one of the other blokes. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he just went off in a tirade, really angry about the whole thing. And I said, well, when he finished, I said, can I ask you another question? He said, yes. I said, a completely different question. He said, what is that? And I said, what are you going to do about it? So I asked him the same question again. Then he went through, because he vented, he got out of his system, which is what he needed. He just needed someone to listen to him. And he went through in a very structured order on what he was going to do. He didn't need me to jump in and say, oh, that's terrible. You should do this or you should do that. He had the answers himself, but he had to get past his emotion, first of all, to be able to, as you said, Angela, go into that, using that brain function where he thinks about it and understands it.
Yeah. So yeah, we need to, and this is actually, I wrote this down. I said one of my tips is also keep a diary.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I regret not having done. And the first one would have been just vent, just get it all out of the system. Just go, and if it is the bastard, the bitch, and, poor me, all of that. And then saying, so what am I going to do about it? What are my next logical steps? And debrief myself that way. But we don't do that. So again, we get stuck in ranting or in the verbal vomiting, or or we just go into with somebody who then agrees with us, and then we don't do anything about it.
Yeah, we just hold it down until it finally comes out as a volcano, and then we feel embarrassed about it, and everybody looks at it because they don't want to hear it either, because they're starting to feel it. So they're telling us that we're doing the wrong thing. And so the end result is you then just repeat the cycle. Now you've got something else to be upset about. And it just gets angry and angry. And this is why we've got so many angry people out there.
And also the journaling aspect, if you do start that when you're younger too, that does come back to what we were saying before about recognizing that you do have the answers within. Because when you start noticing that, you go, oh, okay, and you make this connection. And so therefore it becomes a bit of a practice about, you know, coaching yourself through things, and you actually do start to realize that there's a lot of wisdom within inside of you. So it's a great idea.
Yeah, that was one of mine, was to keep a journal, because the things when I've gone back and I've looked at what I've written about, I've got, there's so much awareness that comes from all of that.
So much wisdom that you didn't even realise you had at the time.
Yeah.
And also my journals, when I look back, have just, the contents changed over time too. But, you know, there were stages where I was just angry and just like writing down. And then I can just see how I process things differently now. And so that's a very different entry. But that was where I was at the time. So it's also a really nice way to see how far you've come, and how you're sort of dealing with life in a different way, I guess.
That's a good book, Nicole.
Yeah. Oh, what's that?
For you, to write a book about the journey of journaling.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, because it's more than just, as you say, you write something down so you can be aware of it. You write your gratitude diaries and things like that, things you're grateful for. But as you said, we change as we go along. It's like if I read a book, I use a highlighting pen. And then when I go back and read the book again, I use a different coloured pen, because I'm highlighting different stuff, because different things now gel. The things that I needed at the time popped off the page. The things I didn't need or couldn't recognise or wasn't ready for yet, I didn't see those. So it's not just putting the stuff down so you don't forget things, but it's also then go back and check it later on and realise that, hey, there was a lot of stuff here. I can see my growth as well. Or I can see where I've started to go back into bad habits or whatever. There's so much knowledge in there.
Yeah. I find Think and Grow Rich is a book like that. No matter how often you read that book, you always learn something new, because you're different. And it's a great book for that.
I love reading back, reading like Alan, reading reading back books again, and then going, that wasn't in there last time. Sure that they rewrote the book in the meantime.
And
magical.
I love what they say about that. What is it? You know, when you read a book for the second time, you don't see what wasn't there, you see what wasn't in you before.
Oh, I love that. That's a good quote. Wow. I love that.
Oh, I've got goosebumps.
Yeah.
This is why I love having these campfire chats, because when we sit down, we have a talk, just so much stuff comes out.
Yeah.
But I'm liking the fact that, you know, from what you're all saying about those things that were important to you, would have liked to have told your younger self, they're not much different to what I've wanted to do. And I think there's solid similarities between men and women in that particular area.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Probably more.
And another one, that I would have loved is, your health is your wealth. I think I would have valued my health a lot more if I'd been aware of that. Not, putting everything before looking after myself. And, we all do it. Men and women do it. Work, to burn out, which is ridiculous. And we're not really working as efficiently as we could if we were healthy within our mind and our body and our soul, for that matter. So that's one thing, is, understand all the areas of life and bring them into every single week in some way, so that you can live your best life.
And would you think that if you've been having this talk, say, a couple of years ago, would your list of things that you would have told your younger self have changed a great deal, or would they still be pretty much the same?
Some of them, and others would be different.
One of them that I have on my list, I've only started this year, and that I've stopped drinking alcohol. And I've chosen 2019 to be alcohol free. And that would have been on my list, that you don't receive any benefits from alcohol. You think you do, but you don't. And that would have been, I have to say, I have not missed it. I do not crave it. And I cannot believe it. Like when I was in my CFO role, I was drinking a bottle of wine a day. That's, and that was my coping mechanism. So it would have been, don't use alcohol as your coping mechanism. You don't need it. There are so many other healthier choices that you could choose that will deal with your stress. And at the time, I didn't even realise that it was what I was doing. If anyone had said to me, how do you cope with stress? I would have said, I never get stressed, which was total BS, total denial. So, yeah.
But this brings us back to finding your own voice and, you know, loving yourself, because a lot of the times we drink alcohol because we fit in. And I know that I lived and I worked in areas where alcohol was just part of the deal. And I've never been a big drinker. And I saw where people were drinking a bottle of wine. And I was working, when I was working in TV, we would go out and people would be drinking a bottle of wine each. And then they would have their grappa and, you know, all of that. And I would be sitting there nursing one glass of wine. And people would really berate me for that.
Yeah.
And so I would, even though I didn't want to, I would still drink more than that I intended to. And now I would never do that. So I would, if somebody said you have to drink, I would go, no, I don't.
Yeah. And it's true. And look, you know, the reason I gave up alcohol so easy, there's a book that I read and it's called The Easy Way for Women to Stop Drinking. Right title for the book. And all it does is it highlights that you get no benefits from it. And it even highlights, like, think back to your first drink, your first sip, and what did you do? And most of us would have gone, ugh. We kept drinking because everyone else was drinking, so we thought, oh, we're missing something. It's just us. So we keep drinking until we like the taste of it. So it was really, that would be one of my major ones now, whereas even a year ago I would never have had that on my list, Alan.
Can I just say too, like, I stopped drinking in 2008, and that was kind of when I found my emotional spectrum. You know, I did this magnificent course up in Byron Bay. It was 7.5 days, and it was after that I made the decision to stop drinking, and totally changed my life. And it was very interesting because I was living overseas at the time. I was living in Beijing, and I shared with close friends that I was going to stop drinking. And it's so interesting to see how people filter their drinking through, it got them to look at their drinking and why they chose to drink, which I found really interesting. But one of the most empowering decisions I think I've ever made. And when I look back at my younger self, I don't think I had any idea who I was. You know, it was just so easy to, you know, go out and be one of the crowd and drink and all that kind of stuff. But that also does take us away. You know, we see it as a form of connection, whereas really it's a form of disconnection.
I agree. I've had so many arguments when we've been drinking.
Yeah.
But now we never have them. And every single relationship in my life has improved 9 months or eight months since I have stopped drinking. And I know that at the end of the year I will continue the way I am, which is good. But I purposely set it up to say, let's just do 2019 and let's just see. So
making it a decision and doing it. Because back in the 70s, that was all we did was drink. And,
exactly.
You know, when I first came to Newcastle as a temporary transfer, it was 5 months. So what did I do? I lived in a hotel, and drank with the regulars every day. And so, most of the time I would say that, I shouldn't have been driving most days, even when I was working through the day, because of the alcohol that I drank. But that's what we did back then.
Exactly.
That was supposed to be, as you said, a way to come together. But really, you're absolutely true when you say it's a form of disconnection. Because we weren't really connected to the people we were sitting there drinking with.
But not only that, we're not really connected to our brain. Like, how many poor decisions do we make when we have been drinking? You know, I've got scars all over my body from stupid things we've done. Dancing on tables doesn't work.
Never pretty, is it? No.
Yeah, well, I tried to take up.
We've all done.
Well, I did take up tap dancing, but I kept falling in the sink, so I gave that up.
And I suppose that ties into another thing that I would say to my younger self. You know, you just got to forgive yourself too. Like holding on to things that you've done and regretting things that you've done is just, you know, you can't change it. So, you know, it's made you who you are. So, you know, learn from it and then move on and call it wisdom.
Yeah.
Mm.
The important part is to learn from it. Don't keep repeating it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all the past is there for us, to learn from it and nothing else. If you hang on to it, that's how you're going to mould your future as well.
Right.
And you're going to repeat yourself or make other silly decisions. So
can I just say one more thing too? Something I think is really important. You know, we're sort of taught, you know, we're sort of, as human beings, connection's important. But, you know, one thing that I truly believe is being alone doesn't mean you're lonely.
Yeah.
And I think if I knew that when I was my younger self, yeah, it would have been nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to actually value your alone time. Like now I love it when I have my alone time. Whereas when I was younger, I was the same, Nicole. I used to like to have people around and all this sort of stuff. But no, I love it now and I'm just like, oh, I've got a day to myself. Yes.
How about you, Angela?
I love solitude. So I sit on the spectrum between introvert and extrovert. I sit right in the middle. I'm one of those typical ambiverts. I love being around people, but I also love being by myself, and I recharge. And it took me a while to actually recognize that. And I know that I actually, when I first got married, I had to negotiate with my now ex-husband that I needed that time for myself, because he would come in and he would say, you know, cup of tea, darling, or, you know, whatever. He was just constantly offering things. And I had to say to him, look, I really need this time by myself. And it's not because I want to block you out, but I need to connect with myself. I need to have the space to actually feel what's going on for me, to contemplate, to read a book, to not do anything, to just lie there. And if you feel that you need to really make sure that I'm okay, or that you need to contribute to my well-being, make dinner, you know, something like that. But it was just negotiating that and feeling, because I've always felt comfortable being by myself. And there were a lot of people around me who couldn't accept that. They would go, but you can't be that alone that long. Yeah, you can. I could, and I still can.
Yeah, because the opposite of that is having to be around people all the time, and then being around the wrong people because the focus was on being around people. And that's what I went through with relationships. The belief was that if you had a woman in your life, then you were, you know, there was something that you were a man. And so all the different relationships I have, I look back at a lot of them, I would go, today I would never go through those. I would stay right away from those. Solitude to me is not a lonely place to be. It's a place where I can be with my thoughts. I can think about new things. You know, I have these talks with everybody, and then I'm an introvert. So it's with an introvert, I'm more likely to have an intimate party where we talk about things in depth, not go out to karaoke bars and things like that. But if I'm around people, I get exhausted, then I pull back into my cave. And people go, is there something wrong? And I'm just recharging. It took me a long time to actually, and it's only been the last few years with everything I've done and that I've finally got to that stage where I looked at it and thought, I'm happy in my company. I now can truthfully say, with all the things happening in my life, I like the person I am. And I like to be around people I like. So it's good to be around myself for a little while on my own.
Conversations, best conversations.
Yeah, you always get the right answers.
Yeah, exactly. Not exactly, not all the time. I have some great arguments with myself.
But is it with yourself or is it with your ego?
It could be a whole bunch of different things there, I can tell you. Hey, shh, be quiet. Go away, I'm talking to the ladies. Go away.
So I'm just looking at my list to see what else. I know. This one I think is valuable. If you can think it, you can do it. That I just think is like, how many times have we been told we can't do something and therefore we don't? Yeah.
That happens so much. And I think wasn't it Einstein who said that imagination came first, that if that was the most powerful thing, if you could think about it, then it could be created. And it is the case, because if we can't think about it, no, we can't create it.
Yeah.
If we thought about it, then there's a solution to every problem.
Yeah. Well, Stephen Covey took that one step further and said everything's been created twice, once in the mind and then in reality. So yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I think my point that resonates with that is mine on my list is take more risks.
Yeah. Yeah, we do play safe, don't we?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've taken some interesting risks in my life where people around me would go, oh, and I go, yeah, but there's nothing certain other than taxes and death. So what's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work out, I'll just change direction and I go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes back to dancing. Just do a pivot.
Yeah.
I would say one thing I've got on here, that question you asked before, Alan, about, is there something, whether a year or two ago, and I've really come to rely on my emotional guidance system, and meaning that all emotions are valuable. They're telling us whether we're heading in the right direction or not. So if we've got a so-called negative emotion, what's that trying to tell us? It's telling us we're moving away from who we really are or what we really want. And when I started playing around with that and paying attention to that, life is just so much easier. So don't label any emotions, just recognizing they're all telling you something. And when you can just sit with them and be with them and inquire into what they're telling you, it's so fun. Fun. And it's easy.
That's it. And Angela, this is your field as well. This is the area that you work in. So you'd resonate with that as well, wouldn't you?
Oh, totally. I would just say, when you're saying don't label your emotions, don't label them positive or negative, but do label the emotion. It's like learn actually what it means. We've got thousands of words for emotions. Yeah. I sometimes give people lists. I say, so write down as many emotions as you can think of in a minute, and they generally come up between 8 and 15. And then when I say, okay, here's a list of all sorts of other emotions, people go, wow. It's like, and when we learn how to label emotions, when I know the difference between being peeved and being irritated and being liverish and being, like raving, then I know what the intensity level is. I can actually manage that much more effectively. And it will change already. It's like, it's like when we talked about empathy. When I recognize something, then I can deal with it more differently.
Yeah. Well, I know that Paul Ekman, with all of his research, when he looked at the expressions that face can pull, he said there was about 10,000 different expressions, but there were 3,000 he's actually given names to and put out a book which is about so thick called FACS, Facial Action Coding System. So if there's that many expressions, there have got to be that many emotions, because the emotions and the expressions are connected.
Yeah.
So if you sat down and you start writing them out, well, some of them are just slightly different to each other, but the time is that if you ask somebody what emotions do you feel, you sit there and you struggle. But there's over 10,000. So that's a real indication of how much we're disconnected from our emotions.
Yeah. And the other thing is what we do, and this is my big thing, is we outsource the responsibility for our emotions to other people. Nobody can make us feel anything.
Exactly.
And we have words in our vocabulary that are supposedly emotions that really are not. Abandoned is not an emotion.
No.
Abandoned
Action.
is a perception. But we do this. We sit there and saying, you've abandoned me. I feel abandoned. And it's like, no, you're actually feeling lonely. You're feeling sad and lonely. So teaching people how to do that, how to feel the emotion on the inside, and noticing when we're going, are you making me feel, or you are doing this, is really, really important. And it makes a really big difference to people. How do we deal with things? Whether we want to be liked or not liked, all of the things that we've talked about follow on from that.
And as you say, if you're talking about emotions, things like abandonment, well, you can feel a whole bunch of different things. You can feel anger, you can feel sadness and all the rest of it. So if you can put another title to it, then you're not another emotion. You're actually at one of those actions or one of those conditions. So it's when you get to that last thing, you go, I feel angry. Now you got to the emotion. Or if I feel sadness, you got to an emotion. So it's getting the right wording, as you say, Angela, because otherwise we're not really going to get closer to it because we're calling it the wrong thing.
Yeah.
We're giving it the wrong label.
And then we don't do anything. That's the thing. We often sit and steep in the emotion because, you know, it's not from us, so therefore we can't do anything. It's like we're being hostage, you know, to our emotion. The victim. So.
Nicole, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, yes, I agree with that, because I mean, if you're sitting there saying, I feel abandoned, where do you go with that?
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere. So that's where we get into the feeling of it.
And that's highly important. So, Karen, what were you thinking there?
No, I was totally agreeing with everyone. And it sort of leads on to the fact that a lot of the times we don't tell people how we're feeling. The 5 regrets of the dying, I just love talking about that, the concept of it. And I think number 5 is, I wish I had expressed my feelings. Like saying to people, you know, this is how you've made me feel. Was that in your intention? Because a lot of the time they'll go, no, that certainly wasn't what I was saying.
Yeah, and I was waiting for Angela to jump in there. I could see that because I picked up there as well. Go ahead, Angela.
What you said was, this is how you made me feel.
Yeah,
So,
was this your intention?
Yeah, but if you say to me, this is how you made me feel, there's already an assigned blame. There's already...
Okay, well, maybe it's the way I've expressed it. I've already taken responsibility for, I feel this way. Was this your intention?
Yeah. So it's about saying, I feel this way, and not you made me feel.
Yeah.
I would avoid that sentence structure altogether.
Yeah, but knowing that you're feeling this way, was that your intention? I think that's a conversation a lot of people need to have.
That's absolutely true, and I could see that real beautiful part of that, Karen. At the same time, with Angela, it's a case of, you know, when you said such and such, I chose to feel, I felt this way. Doesn't say that putting blame or anything else. You did that. I felt this. And then you, as you said, Karen, was that in your intention? We try to abbreviate everything all the time, and I think this is where we then turn around and we get these incorrect wordings, and we blame the other person. As soon as you say, well, you made me feel, as you said, Angela, you're putting a barrier up to that. But, you know, that person's got to put a barrier up to you. I don't want to listen to that because you're blaming me for your feelings. And this is why we don't get those connections. We don't get solutions to problems. We just argue more. If we expanded it out and said, look, when you did such and such, I felt this way, which doesn't put blame on anybody. It's just a cause and effect. And therefore, and as you said then, Karen, was that your intention? That would be a conversation where you can get a solution.
Yes.
There's a very good model. I don't know if you've heard of, but nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's actually used in peace negotiations. And he took it a step further. He doesn't say, when you did this, I felt. He says, when I saw you do this and when I heard you say that. So it comes back to my observation, what my perception is. So the other person can say, because if I said, when you did this, the other person can still say, I didn't do that. But when I say, when I saw you do this, then it's my observation. And then the other person can say, really, did I do that? There's much more choice available all of a sudden.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
And I think that's a really good point probably to close this off on, and that for people to go away and think about that, because I think that's an area of major concern with people. It's the base of a lot of problems we have today. And if we stop and we think about, well, how are we actually responding to other people and what words are we using back to them? How does that exacerbate the problem? And how does it move towards a solution, or does it exacerbate the problem? One thing I'd like to ask you as we go through after this, if you can also send me a message of the books that you mentioned, the titles and the authors, and I'll put those up in the comments as well. Nicole, you were going to say something then?
I was going to say, I think, you know, when we're saying, when I saw you or when I heard you, it's also like an act of generosity, isn't it? It allows people to have somewhere to go. And I think, you know, when you allow even a little space so that something can happen in, then amazing things can happen. That's been my experience over time, because I was never very good at it, and I feel like, you know, it's something I'm conscious of now, and I just noticed the difference. And I like the fact that it is, I know that when I do it with people and when people do it with me, it is an act of generosity. And once you've got that little bit of generosity, there's somewhere to go with it.
And when you say that as well, you've actually said to the person, I've seen you and I've heard you as well, which at an unconscious level, that has an impact on that conversation with that person.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for being here today. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm going to have to get you back on again. And I'll probably extend on this as well, because I don't think we went through all 10, and there'll probably be new ones that come up as well. But so everybody who's listening today, think about it and you just write down your own list.
Yeah, put them in the comments.
And see what comes up. And if you've got some things that you would like to comment on as well, if you just want to tell us what some of the things that you would do, that'd be great, because it's a learning to be able to get it out of yourself first of all, but it's a great learning for everybody else who's listening in to connect with that and go, oh, I can see that. Oh, that's one of the ones that I had as well. The more that we can see that we're similar to other people, the more it brings us together.
Yeah.
And that's what we together, the hashtag's all about. You know, male and female. Today I've realised that from the things you've been talking about, there's so many similarities between each of you, but at the same time, there's also similarities from what your three of you have said to what I've said. So there's similarities between men and women. And if we focus on those similarities and how they complement and everything else, we can probably actually build stronger relationships between the genders. So that's one of the reasons why I loved when the women have asked me if they could come into the panel discussions. And I think, Karen, you were one of the first ones to ask me that. That was a real blessing. So thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. Because I firmly believe that the more we actually learn about ourselves, the more we can learn about each other.
That's it.
Because I think the fact we don't know ourselves sometimes creates problems with everyone else.
Well, if we don't know where we are, we'll look at everybody else and we can't really connect with them, because we see ourselves one way one day and another way the next day. How can we connect with that person that we see in the same way each time? Because we're at different places.
Which was actually one of mine, was we all reflect each other.
That's
so
it.
learn from that. If these things keep coming up, look inside and say, why is this person continually showing me this? What do I need to learn?
Yeah, and I think being a bit more gentle on yourself now and thinking about what you did as a young child, you take the pressure off that young child as well. And that improves our quality of life. So again, thank you, Angela, Nicole and Karen, for being on here today. I really appreciate it. And to everybody else who's been listening in, I hope you enjoyed it as well. And we'll see you on the next Campfire panel discussion. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.